Hey everyone, welcome to the Irretrievable Breakdown podcast where we talk about all things divorce. I'm Matt Dolan with Dolan Divorce Lawyers in Connecticut, and I'm joined by my co-host Nicole Bikakis, who is also the managing partner of Dolan Divorce Lawyers. And today we are going to talk about how you should tell your spouse you want a divorce if you have definitively decided you want a divorce, and also how you should share the news with your children. Nicole, how is your week going so far, and how was your weekend?
It's a long weekend, kind of rainy. That was a bummer, but
I was supposed to see you on, I feel like the last 3 episodes we've had, I was supposed to see you the prior weekend, but I ended up not seeing you. We were both supposed to go to a Memorial Day party, on Sunday? And It was raining, so we decided not to go, but did you still go?
Yeah, it was really nice. They did a good job.
How was the party? Was it all inside, or how did they make it work?
Yeah, they switched from grilling to different kind of food, and they had crafts and everything set up for the kids, and it was nice. It was a good group.
Did their house get trashed?
Maybe a little.
Nice. Yeah,
kids had a good time. That was nice.
Having a huge party like inside your house seems like sort of a nightmare, especially when there's kids involved. So
they had a floor. They had a separate area downstairs where they tried to, get the kids to stay down there. So it helped contain the madness.
Nice. Yeah. Well, one of these days, maybe I will see you on the weekend.
One of these days, Matt, maybe you'll come out to one of these parties.
Probably not anytime soon, considering Jess is going to give birth in 2.5 weeks.
That's true.
But maybe after that, or maybe before. We'll see. But anyways, so let's talk about how somebody should share the news of divorce with their spouse when they've decided they want a divorce. So let me first caveat this by the fact that we are not mental health professionals, and a lot of the time, like how you should tell your spouse, it's really sort of beyond our purview and not really something we're qualified to give really specific advice on or to really know what is best. So this may be more of telling people what not to do, as far as what will very much present poorly to a judge. But we can also give a little bit of guidance on what people should do, knowing that you should take it with a grain of salt and every situation is different. And really, talking to a mental health professional, if you're really unsure of how to approach it, is probably best. So first off, Nicole, my feeling is that you really shouldn't say the D word, the divorce word, unless you are sure you want a divorce. I don't know that it's a great thing for a relationship to just start, dropping divorce bombs whenever there's a fight. I think it can just erode trust in a relationship and really isn't great. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
For sure. I think if you're looking to actually break the news that you want a divorce to your spouse and you are sure, frankly, the way you present it is in a way that doesn't seem like you're waiting to be convinced otherwise, right? Certainly, I think just human nature and human relationships are the way they are. There may be instances where whatever's going on in your marriage, you guys are throwing the word divorce around, and ultimately that can either be a wake-up call to some people to get into counseling together, to work on it. But certainly if what you're trying to accomplish here is you want to break the news and you don't want it to be open for debate, you want to share the news with your spouse that you want this divorce, it has to be presented in a way that you are communicating your decision to move forward with the process versus kind of presenting in a way where it's up for debate.
Right. And I guess you say throwing around the word divorce, it probably does make sense to actually talk about it if you are having reservations, to have an open conversation with your spouse about really I'm unhappy or I'm not happy, in this relationship. And obviously divorce might come out in that scenario as something that you are thinking about, or your spouse may bring it up if they hear you talk about how unhappy you are. But before you really definitively say, I want a divorce, that can be different than talking about divorce in sort of a loose way. I really think you want to try to pursue all avenues to, save your relationship if that's something you're interested in doing. You may want to look at it and say, all right, I gave this my best shot. And in those scenarios, I think, pursuing couples counseling or individual counseling can really help you get clarity on what you want to do in your relationship if you do definitively want a divorce.
I do think getting yourself informed before you decide either way that you want to move forward with a divorce is important. So, like I always tell people, if you're coming to talk to a divorce lawyer isn't there to help you decide if you're going to get divorced, or to help you save your marriage, I guess is a better way to put it. They're not there to convince you not to get divorced. They're there to tell you what to expect if you move forward with a divorce. So it can be important to talk to a divorce lawyer so you understand what the next steps are going to look like and what the future might look like. But if you want to talk about whether divorce is the right choice from a personal or emotional place, that's something you can, of course, talk to a therapist about. There is something called discernment counseling where you and your spouse can go meet with typically it's a couples counselor who helps talk through whether the marriage is salvageable. That's not a very technical term for it, but there is this thing called discernment counseling that's available to couples who are sort of in this in thinking about divorce, but not sure that they're quite there yet, or that they're at a point where they can't turn back and they must move forward with a divorce. So there's discernment counseling. And then also, if you just aren't sure about the financial implications of whether divorce makes sense for you, whether you'll be okay financially following a divorce, speaking to even a financial advisor in conjunction with a divorce lawyer might be a good way to, again, just prepare yourself before you decide definitively that you want to move forward with a divorce.
Right. Okay. So let's say somebody has decided that they definitively want to get a divorce. How should they be approaching it with their spouse? Should they talk to them about it first, in your opinion, or should they be filing without giving their spouse a heads up? What are your thoughts on the approach?
So to start by saying, I think you touched on this earlier, obviously there are a variety of different circumstances people might find themselves in. So if you are in a situation where there's any type of, let's say, domestic violence or coercive control or threats of that there might be the children might be at risk, or that someone might try and abscond with the kids when the news breaks. Obviously, under those circumstances, you may want to take a different approach, right? I think what we're speaking to is kind of the general, we're talking about situations where domestic violence and things of that nature are not at play.
Right. And when Nicole says a different approach, I think what she's getting at is, if there are domestic violence concerns, or you have a concern that your spouse is just going to dissipate a ton of money, spend a ton of money, move money in a non-recoverable way, in those scenarios, you might want to file for divorce and have your spouse served with divorce papers without giving them a heads up, because once you serve them, what are called automatic orders go into place. And those are orders that say a number of things, but mainly that you can't just dissipate assets. You can't spend money inappropriately. And it also says that you cannot permanently remove the children from the state of Connecticut. So if you have concerns of dissipation or things of that nature, then you might, you should definitely talk to a lawyer first so that they can give you very specific advice to your situation. Obviously, we're here speaking very broadly, so this is not specific advice. But if you are thinking about serving your spouse without giving them notice, talk to a lawyer first. You can get a free consultation with our office, and many other lawyers give free consultations. So get some insight. But back to the
especially again, if there are safety concerns, because if there are
Right.
safety concerns, there's strategy behind the best way to approach filing a divorce. Are you also filing a restraining order in conjunction with it? So again, there's and under those sorts of circumstances, you do want to talk to an attorney and really go through your plan with them before you move forward.
Okay. So putting those scenarios aside, Nicole, what are your thoughts on the best approach when there are not any domestic violence issues? There are not any worries about somebody, spending all the marital savings while after they share this news. What are your thoughts on the approach?
Well, I think the way you break the news to your spouse is going to set the tone for possibly the rest of the divorce. So with that in mind, approaching it in a very human level where you might want to give them a heads up before you file. So that way they're not completely blindsided. And again, it may be that in your situation, they shouldn't be blindsided because they should know. But I do think most people, even though they may turn around and say, how could she or he not know I was going to file after everything he did or said? The reality is there's a lot of times, like we said, where people talk about divorce, but they're not serious about it. So in the case where now you're serious about moving forward with divorce, moving forward and filing a divorce and then telling them or having them find out by being served could really set the tone for a very contentious process.
Right. And a lot of people fear that if they share the news in advance, their spouse might get a lawyer and serve them first. And the reality is it doesn't really matter who serves who first in a divorce. You still have to work out all of the terms of the divorce. The only thing that would change is if you can't reach out in agreement in your divorce and you have to have a trial, then the plaintiff presents evidence first. The person who filed for divorce presents evidence first, and the defendant, the person who was served, goes second. But even that, like any lawyer is going to tell you they don't really care who goes first. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. So I think it's much more important to think about sort of the health of your relationship and the tone you are starting your divorce on than to worry about who serves who first.
Right.
So.
And then in terms of, how you do it and like what you say, that really is going to be more of a personal decision, but you want to think a little bit about how you would receive this news, or how, if this news was being given to you, how you would appreciate receiving that news. So obviously not doing it in like a public setting, for example, where, there are other people around, just out of respect, perhaps having a one-on-one conversation with them. Or if you can't do it via conversation, you can put it in writing if it's easier to get your thoughts out that way. But again,
and to be clear, sometimes you may need to do it in like a public setting for safety concerns, but don't do it in a public setting for like embarrassment's sake, to try to embarrass your spouse.
But that's back to the point we made. If you're doing it that way for safety concerns, then you also want to be talking with a lawyer about other ways to protect yourself if
Right.
there are concerns about safety.
Right. I also don't love when people serve their spouse at work. Again, I think that sometimes you need to, if you like don't know where they live and they're being super secretive and that's your only way to serve them. But if you serve them at work, it's starting your divorce off on the wrong foot and can make things more contentious than it needs to be. And, ultimately, if you have to have a trial, like a judge isn't going to love the fact that you served your spouse at work. That will come out in the evidence, and it gives the vibes of you're just trying to embarrass this person through beginning the divorce process, and it's not a great way to start things out.
Well, from a practical perspective as well, having them served at work, you don't know how that impacts their work as well, right? Like bringing personal matters into the workplace. And if that has any chance of jeopardizing their job or making their job more difficult, then you're directly making it harder potentially to, ensure financial stability following the divorce. Like you want to ensure that your spouse's job is safe and protected. You don't want to cost them their job or want to have this divorce bleed into their work unnecessarily, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to, whether you're going to be in need of spousal support or you're going to be paying spousal support, or you just want to ensure like a fair division of assets, someone's earning capacity, ability to earn, all of that is very relevant in the divorce process. So you never know what serving someone at work might end up what situation that might create for them. So again, it's also not a smart thing to do unless, like Matt is saying, again, there's no other way to serve them because they're making it very hard because they're evading service.
Right. And you would basically have to not know where they live, because you can serve somebody at their house via abode service, which is essentially just leaving the paperwork at their house. You don't have to serve them in hand. So the fact that you don't know when they're going to be home is not an excuse. You would have to not know where they live. And, back to what Nicole was saying, it's just like not a great look if you don't want to pay alimony and you served your spouse at work, potentially costing them their job, or you want alimony and you served your spouse at work, potentially causing them to lose their job. It's just the optics are terrible and you shouldn't do it, essentially. So,
I
Nicole,
also think in terms of timing of if you're breaking the news about a divorce, generally you want to avoid, like big events or a holiday or birthdays. Again, you want to be thoughtful about the time you choose to share this news with your spouse.
Yeah. And don't do it like in the middle of a big fight. That's not ideal. You probably want to wait until things are cooled down, calm, and you can, just try to, in an open way, speak to the fact that you've been unhappy for a long time and you want to part ways. Try not to play the blame game where you're just pinning everything on them. Make it more about how you're feeling and the fact that you're unhappy in the relationship and you think it would be best for you and your spouse and your kids, if you have them, to part ways and to try to do it as amicably as possible. Maybe you even talk about the fact that you want to try to do mediation if that's something you're looking to do. Or if you don't want to do mediation and you are looking to get a lawyer, maybe you say, I do have a lawyer, but I'm working with somebody who's, going to try to resolve this amicably, and, we don't want things to escalate too much. Or maybe if you're watching this, you really do want things to escalate, and in which case you'll probably just ignore all of this advice anyway. But our approach is to try to keep things as amicable as possible. So if that's what you're trying to accomplish, then you want to be delicate and empathetic in how you share the news with your spouse.
I mean, that's something I tell my mediation clients, clients who are choosing to try and resolve their divorce through mediation. As part of the process is, we're going to focus on presenting things from our own perspective, like using I statements and not sort of like if you're going to break the news, focus on, what it is you want to convey to your spouse. This isn't like opportunity to kind of list all your grievances against them, but just kind of share why it is you are making this decision at this point. And so I guess the real message here is like, think about what you want to say before you share the news and have it be a thoughtful conversation versus kind of in the middle of an argument or doing it just to hurt them in a certain way, or just picking a really bad time. Be thoughtful about the timing and the content of that conversation.
Right. And you also want to be thoughtful about making sure you have the support structure in place that you need. Obviously, beginning the divorce process can be tremendously upsetting. You know, it's your marriage. It's the first step in your marriage coming to an end. So you don't want to be navigating that on your own. You know, you may have leaned on your spouse for a lot of things in the past, and once you're getting a divorce, you can't do that. So you need, or you might be able to do it in certain respects, but not entirely, and the dynamics are going to change. So you want to make sure that you have friends or family in place, if you have them close by, who you can lean on and talk to for support. I always recommend getting into therapy or some sort of mental health counseling to help you navigate this. It's one thing to have friends helping you, but a real qualified mental health professional can give you that extra layer of support, which can be very helpful.
But I also want to just like second to that caution as well, that while it is important to make sure you have a support group there to kind of help you get through it emotionally, what you don't want to start doing is giving everyone license to give you their opinions on what you should do in your divorce and what you should agree to and what you should ask for. You really want to leave to you and your lawyer, because at the end of the day, it's very easy for someone with no skin in the game to say, you need to be firm on this and demand this, because it's not their divorce. But we like to call it the peanut gallery sometimes, when you have a client who's coming in and insisting on all these different things, and it's all demands that their family or their friends are telling them they can't walk away without making those demands or receiving those demands. And it's very easy, if you're not one of the two people in the divorce process, to take a very firm position on something. So you need to be careful how much you're letting people into the actual divorce process.
Right. And as far as sort of another thing to think about is, if you begin the divorce process, it can be very uncomfortable to be under the same roof as the person you're getting a divorce from. So I would not recommend you just like move out to get out of the situation. That's a very complicated situation that we'll cover in another show. We may have already covered it. Honestly, I can't even remember. If we haven't, then we will. But before you make the decision to move out of the house, you really should be seeking legal advice to understand the implications of moving out, because there can be financial implications, implications on custody. So don't just move out of the house in order to avoid the situation unless you're fully informed on all the implications of doing that.
And don't go and change the locks on your spouse because you've decided to get a divorce.
Yeah,
either.
You can't do that. That'll get you arrested. That's illegal. Right. So, but Nicole, I'm going to now move into talking about how to share the news with your children if you're getting a divorce. But before we get into that, anything else you want to cover as far as sharing the news with your spouse?
No, just again, I think the overall message here is you want to have a conversation that's hopefully going to steer the divorce in a more civilized and amicable direction. So think about how you're going to accomplish that thoughtfully.
Right. So now, how should people share the news with their children that they are getting a divorce?
So really, the children are this shared goal that parents have, right? I think
and again,
the one thing
full
that
disclosure, not mental health professionals here, so we're giving some sort of general advice. But if you really have concerns, talk to a therapist, talk to somebody who can give you kind of fully qualified advice on this. Anyways,
right, and like what exactly you say to your children, that's really something that you can, if you and your spouse are unclear as to like how you should frame it, that's something you can talk to a therapist about, so you know that you're approaching it the best way possible for your children. Maybe even speaking to their teachers, to kind of like get an idea of like what's the best way to kind of break the news to the children. But I think the most important thing here is that you are having a conversation with your spouse about how to talk to the children about it. Don't go and tell your children about the divorce before you've told your spouse, And
Oh yeah,
then even
that's a big no-no. Honestly, I
yes,
think even if you have adult children, I don't love that. Even if somebody's an adult child of yours, they probably still don't want to be put in the middle of your divorce. So I think whenever possible, whether they're kids or adult children, you know, try to get on the same page with your spouse about how you're doing it.
right.
So,
Like, do not tell your kids about the divorce before you've spoken to your spouse and the two of you have at least discussed breaking the news together, or getting on the same page about how you're going to break the news to them. Again, it's a matter of just like respect. Again, this does not apply in where there are safety concerns or other concerns that you need to take into consideration. But on average, this is a decision that you should be making with your spouse, like how to break this news. And then you guys know together how to deal with the aftermath of that, right? If your kids are having a difficult time, you both can be prepared to shepherd them through that.
right. And if you don't get on the same page with your spouse and then you break the news to your kids in an arguably inappropriate way or a way that your spouse feels is inappropriate, they will probably present that to a judge when a judge is making a decision on custody. And that can have real implications on custody as far as your judgment in how you share such an important event with your children. So just be very careful about how you're sharing the news. Most important is getting on the same page as your spouse. But if you can't do that, at least having the cover of having spoken to a mental health professional, and I say the cover, putting cover aside of how it looks to a judge, I think just trying to do the right thing, getting that advice from a third party who really knows what they're talking about is a good idea.
I mean, because the reality is you're going to tell your children, and it's going to be very difficult news for them, and obviously different ages come with different challenges for how they're going to receive that news and practical considerations as to what you need to do to support your kids through this process. But I think, and again, in mediation, clients start off the process by talking about their goals, their goals and interests, and a shared goal they always have is protecting the kids, making sure the kids are all right, and ensuring that the kids get through this the best way possible. And so again, you're going to be breaking this news and they're going to be having a difficult time. And if you guys can focus on your kids and the well-being of your kids, then that'll help, right? Steer the divorce in a more like, having that shared goal of protecting the kids will kind of help you guys get through the divorce. Now, again, there are plenty of divorces and cases where custody is really contentious. Parents are not on the same page about a lot of things concerning their children. So understandably, they're also possibly not going to be on the same page about how to respond to the children once they've received this news and they're asking questions, how you answer those questions, how you support them. So there still is the very real likelihood that you guys are going to have differing approaches for how to deal with your children's reaction to the divorce. So like if there is the availability of support in the form, whether that's a therapist or children's teachers or any other individuals that can help, having spoken to your spouse about that beforehand, you at least will know who you can turn to try and, again, help support your kids through this the best way possible.
Right. And you also want to focus on the fact that it's not your kid's fault in talking to them. They will often need that reassurance. They might draw the conclusion that somehow your divorce is their fault. And it's very important to reassure them that that is not the case. And separate from sharing the news with them, the divorce can go on for quite some time and there can be a lot of disputes between you and your spouse. And it's very important to not put your kids in the middle of those disputes. If you're fighting about money or the custody schedule or things like that, don't discuss it with your children. It's not good for them. And if it comes out to a judge or a guardian ad litem or somebody in the future who's sort of deciding your fate, if you can't reach an agreement with your spouse, If it comes out that you've been sharing that kind of adult information with your kids, it's not a good look. And it's just going to make the people who are making decisions question your judgment, and it's going to work to your deficit. So
Don't use your
keeping
kids as messengers between
Mhm.
you and your spouse during the divorce. I mean, truly, you should be keeping them out of this as much as possible. They just need, like Matt said, to know that this isn't their fault. You got to reassure them that this is something that you and the other parent are going through. This is something you guys are going to solve. That as kids, this is not on them to be involved with, right? This is not something that they're ever going to fix, right? So don't bring these very adult problems into their lives. It's really something that you and your spouse have to work through, and your children should be protected and shielded from it as much as possible.
Right. All right. So those are the basics on how to share with your spouse the fact that you want a divorce, and also how to share that news with your children. Nicole, do you feel that there's anything we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about?
No, there's, and I'm sure even watching this, someone, you're going to have a lot of questions if you're actually in it and really thinking about the best way to frame the discussion, whether it's with your spouse or with your children. And again, I think the big takeaway here is there are people you can talk to help prepare you for these conversations, right? So whether that's talking first to a lawyer, talking to a therapist, talking to a financial advisor, or talking to, your children's teachers, or, trusted friends or family, whatever it is that you need to do to get in the right headspace so you feel like you're ready to have these very difficult and uncomfortable conversations.
Yes. Wise words from Nicole Bikakis.
That's me.
So that's going to do it for us today on the Irretrievable Breakdown podcast, where we talk about all things divorce. You can watch us on YouTube, or you can listen to us on the go on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. As usual, if you have any additional questions about your divorce, whether it's how to break the news, or you're looking for representation in a divorce or family law case here in Connecticut, we would invite you to contact our office. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.